Hey, let's get right to it. We're talking about boxes today. We're going to talk about toolboxes. First one I'm going to talk about is that one that you've seen before in videos. It's the one I made a video one time talking about when I bought it, and a good friend of mine who's now no longer with us, Jack Connor, he bid against me on the thing just to aggravate me and help me make fun of the auctioneer for begging for every last penny. But it sits in our family room floor, and it's been sitting there a long time. Betty and I tried to figure out the other day how long it's been sitting there, and we couldn't come up with it. But we think somewhere between 35 and 45 years probably that we've had that thing used as a coffee table in our family room. It's full of family pictures. Betty's got a routine in our fire drill where if we have a house fire, we drag that box out the door with us as we're escaping the fire because it's got all those family pictures in it she doesn't want to lose. The kind of things I love in boxes are represented in this box. I love boxes, first of all, that have wide boards in them. I'm going to call them a 6-board box. In other words, the bottom, the top, the front, the back, and the ends are made of one board. This one's almost a 6-board box. Everything that I just mentioned except the bottom in this box are one board. The bottom in this box is not one board. It's made up of multiple boards. But this box has dovetailed joints in the corners. That's another thing that I love to find in an old box. It indicates that the box, it's something about the age of the box, something about the craftsman who built the box, something about the way the box was constructed. And because some of these boxes can be 150, almost 200 years old and still be sturdy boxes, that's one of the reasons that happens in many of them. They have old joints that you don't see anymore, handmade dovetail joints in all 4 corners of this old box. The thing about this box that makes it real special is the memories that it has. Now, there was a time 40 years ago, this box was for sale. I would have sold it, made a little profit on it, been tickled to death. But since that time, that box is sitting in our family room long enough that our grandchildren, I'd venture to say every one of them, and for sure all our great-grandchildren have played on that box. They sit there in the floor or stood there on their knees in front of that box and played with something. More often than not, it was a tin full of small cars and trucks. Matchbook size, some of them might be matchbook cars even, but that kind of thing. Grandma Betty has them in that cabinet over there. Everybody knew where they were, and they'd say, Grandma, can we play with the cars? And they'd get down there on that box and play with them. Just the other day, Lou, our youngest great-grandchild, and her friend Charlie, they were playing on that box. I said, this is the first, I think, Barbie dolls on the box. All those things, many of those kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, nieces, nephews, played with that box. We got memories associated with that box, and it'd be really, really hard for you to buy that box from me nowadays because you'd have to pay multiple times what it's worth to get me to turn loose of it. Old black paint toolbox. Now that's old paint, but it's not the kind of old paint I'm talking about when I say I love old paint. And when I bought that box, that paint was pretty much intact. So all that wear that I love in old paint that box now has, that's been put there, sitting there in this room with those grandkids and maybe some of my youngest daughter's dogs jumping up and playing on that box. Another thing that's unusual about this box are the handles. It's got rope handles on it. It's just 2 holes in the end of the box and a piece of sturdy hemp rope run through those holes to make a handle. You see that occasionally, but that's somewhat unusual in that you don't see that a whole lot of times in a box like this. And this box had that, and it kind of got my attention to start with. So I started looking a little bit more at the box, and so. But I think that's the only one I have right now that has handles like that. So there sits one. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Over there in that same room against the wall, or hanging on the wall, is another form of toolbox. And this is a different kind of a toolbox. This is the kind that a carpenter most generally used, and they carried their tools in it. And we call that the Kogan box, and it's been there a long time too. In fact, it has family history. Betty's dad, Willard Kogan, that was his toolbox. When he was a carpenter working down a crane, he carried his tools in that toolbox back and forth to work. We somehow ended up with it, and I don't know, years ago I painted it blue and distressed it and put his name on it. It wasn't originally like that when we got it, but it's been hanging on that wall a long time too. And if you drop that front door down, drop the opening down, you'll see inside it, it's got kind of a tilt compartment for smaller things like pencils and rulers and various things like that could be held in it, in different compartments, and a place for your handsaw. That's another form of old toolbox, and it's hanging there on the wall. That one too, I doubt you could buy that one from us because it belonged to Betty's dad, and he carried it to work when he was a young man. Another one of these boxes that I'm going to look at now is, I think probably it was something for documents or papers, or it might have even been a sugar chest. But it has so many of the things. In fact, it has everything. Everything that I love in old boxes, just about, this box has. And there's another video about this box too. It's one that I bought from old Jess Bagshaw for $3 in an antique shop, and that in itself is enough to make the box something that you wouldn't want to turn loose from. But this, I just love this little box. It's made out of pine. It's been a 6-board box originally. It's hard to say because all the boards look like they started out as one board, but the lid on the thing looks like 2 boards now, and I'm not sure that it started out as 2 boards or that board just split. I'm not sure. The ends and the front and the back are one board. And it has dovetail corners as well. Not only does it have dovetail corners, the lid on this box had dovetail joints in it with molding around the lid. The board that was the lids dovetailed into the ends of the mold boards around it. And that is really unusual. You say, well, Luke, I've seen that before. Well, I've seen it before too, but it's still really unusual. If you look at all the little boxes that you find, or all the toolboxes that you find, or any kind of boxes that you find, and the lid is dovetailed like this, I'm going to say probably 1% or less of the lids you find are dovetailed like this one. So it's unusual. It's rare to find one with the lid dovetailed as well as the corner joints in the box. And another thing I haven't mentioned yet, I don't think, is the hardware on this box. And it's homemade, forged. Somebody made this stuff in a forge a lot of years ago, and they made the hinges and the pulls on this box. This box also has a lock set in it, and most of these kind of boxes did have some kind of a lock set where you could lock the toolbox up. The older ones are more apt to have like a keyhole in them and use a skeleton key. The older ones have that kind of a lock. The more recent ones generally might have a hasp where you put a padlock on the outside. While I'm saying that, I'm going to say that a toolbox was something that the maker of was proud of. In fact, often a person that was carrying a toolbox, a woodworker and he was proud of what he built, and he used his toolbox as a sales example of the craftsmanship of his work. So a lot of these guys put that fine detail and craftsmanship into their box so that they could show you an example of the kind of work that they did. They were proud of their toolbox, and it was something that they built with pride, used to demonstrate their skill and their craftsmanship. Of course, there are other boxes that some of you might call totes. We're probably going to look at some examples of those kind of boxes. and continue with some examples of the kind of boxes that these first ones I've shown you have been. I've got a lot of them around here, and I think probably what I'll do is go around and take some pictures of them, and maybe we'll look at some of them. Maybe I'll talk about some of them. If not, there'll be like music while you look at the rest of these boxes that I'm calling toolboxes as an example of the kind of boxes that I like and love. You're looking at a couple of them now, and one of them is big. These both have like cast handles on the end, and usually a lot of times you can find a cast date. If you take those handles off, there'll be a cast date in that cast iron handle that's screwed to the end of a box like this. And generally they're in the neighborhood of the late 1800s, after the Civil War, but prior to the turn of the century, prior to 1900. When you see an old box, if it's got dovetails in the corners and some of those other old features, but it's got handles on it like this, it's probably later in the time of from Civil War to the end of that century. These two are like that. The one on the bottom's big. If you fill it up with tools, it'd take two really good men to carry that box, because that's a heavy box when it's empty. And the other one's heavily constructed. They're both dovetailed, at least 4-board construction. The ends and the front and the back were made from one board. The bottom one's some pretty wide boards. I'd say those are 24 inches across the grain. They both have molding around the top and the bottom. The lid on both of them is kind of the same way. It was built with a frame and then a smaller piece put on it. It's kind of a raised crown lid. I don't like those as well as I do the one-board lids, but you see a lot of them that are made this way. Saved having to have a big wide board to make the lid. And when you see them like that with a lid like that, very often the bottom of them's not one board either. It's multiple boards. I didn't check these two to see whether the bottoms were one board or not, but if I was guessing, I'd guess no. The one on the top's got little compartments in it, and the one on the bottom, and I think it's had a sliding compartment in it that's now gone. Two more examples of toolboxes. The guy that owned the one on the top, he's carved his initials into the top of the box, you can see there. So two more examples of the kind of box I'm talking about, the kind of box that I've had tens, maybe hundreds of, the kind of box that I still probably have 20 or 30 of them around here, and we may see some more of them over there. I'm going to let that be the end of this discussion about toolboxes, and in the next video we'll talk about maybe another kind of a box besides toolboxes. This has been an introductory to things I like. I like wide boards. I like old paint. I like handmade joints that add to the stability and the longevity and the strength of the box. I like unusual handles and lock sets. I want to wrap this up by talking about toolboxes like the ones we've been talking about that you might see online for really a lot of money, big bucks. First of all, I think it is really cool. I just love it that such a thing as this exists. I'm talking about a toolbox from the middle 1800s that's still in pristine condition and that has all the tools in it that the person who was using this toolbox and these tools used in the middle to late 1800s. In other words, the hand-built toolbox that this artisan owned and carried their tools in and used the tools that were in them. This box owned by a person who was probably born before Abraham Lincoln was president, and the tools that were used to build the box and to build numerous other things in that time period in our history, that something like that still exists. I just love that. I absolutely love that. So what you're looking at here in this next picture or pictures is such a thing. A toolbox from that era, pristine condition, still with all the tools in it, and priced for multiple thousands of dollars. That is really cool. Now, I don't have the wherewithal to be buying toolboxes like that, but I have lots of toolboxes from that era, and I've already told you, I love those boxes. I love the time period that they represent. I love the look that they have, and I've got the bargain Hard Times Guy version of those boxes many times over. As this video closes out, take a look. Busted back in a heavy load, won't get through to save my soul early in the morning. Always been a gambling man, rolling bones with either hand. 7 years the promised land, early in the morning. Well, whiskey be my dying bed, tell me where can I lay my head? Not with me is all she said, early in the morning. Well, if I had a dollar bill, yes I believe I surely will, go to town and drink my fill early in the morning. Well, if I had a dollar bill, yes I believe I surely will, go to town and drink my fill early in the morning. Well, early in the morning. I hope you've enjoyed this video that's a tutorial on old toolboxes. Until the next time, I'm the Hard Times Guy.